guys, Mustang in here bringing you another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video, and so we are continuing on with the team building guides for the new stages of Super Battle Road, and we are going to be going on to the Team Bardock one. So this is this set's, I guess, like novelty stage, if you want to call it that, similar to Ginyu Force and I guess in a way how Peppy Gals was when it first released. Obviously that team is much wider with options and much more powerful now, but yeah, this is going to be an interesting one because when we look at the category, it's incredibly small. So this is not so much a guide where we'll go through all of the top picks and honorable mentions because honestly there aren't really that many units to talk about, right? So you have the free-to-play LR Team Bardock as the leader that you get from farming up all of the free-to-play members of the team. They're obviously going to be the best leader for this. Still only able to have them at 79% because for whatever reason this unit has been out for almost 2 years and we still don't have the ability to rainbow them, so I don't know what the hell they're doing in that regard, but that's who you're going to use as the leader because it covers the entire category. There isn't really anyone else on the team that has a leader skill that would be good enough to replace them with, but they're a free-to-play unit, so you should have them just by farming up the team. And if you haven't farmed up the team, I don't know why you would be expecting to be able to do this stage. So what we're going to do for the layout of this one is I'm going to talk about the 6 units first that is the team that I recommend, the team that I am going to build, and then we'll talk about a couple of the other units that you could sub in their place. So we're basically just going to be going over what I think is the best team. Most of these units are free to play, like the base free to play team. You definitely can get the stage done. You might have to be quite heavy on the item usage and smart tactics, but there's obviously a couple of ways that will make this a lot easier for you. So Team Bardock are the leader. You're going to be running them and a friend most likely. They do work as a support unit for the team. They give 60% attack and defense to everybody on the team. So one strategy is of course to just run them as third slot floating units, and they're going to be providing a massive amount of support to everyone else on the team. That is what I would recommend doing, just having them off rotation. They are pretty good. They're not the craziest unit like defensively or anything, but they can deal out a pretty reasonable amount of damage. They share a lot of links with the physical LR Team Bardock, physical LR Bardock that we're going to talk about in a moment. But I mean, there's not much getting around it, right? You're just going to be using these guys as the lead because they have the 120 leader skill. So moving on, we have the physical LR Bardock. He is by far the best unit on the team. If you do not have this guy, then obviously this stage is going to be a lot more difficult for you because his Easy A is very good. He raises defense on both of his supers, which is something that's definitely useful for Super Battle Road. Or any more difficult content. He seals on his 18 key super, which again is incredibly useful for Super Battle Road, especially because the final fight of this stage is against one enemy. So obviously if you seal them, that keeps you safe from super attacks for 2 turns, and is very, very beneficial in managing your item usage and the amount of damage that you're going to take. The other thing that is super good is that once only this guy gets a massive amount of ki, a huge attack buff, and a guaranteed crit when you're fighting against a Frieza, and Frieza is the final enemy on this stage. It's just a solo fight against Frieza by himself. So if you get your rotation right at the end of the previous fight, and you go into the last fight with this guy on rotation, you can basically guarantee that you're getting your 18 key super, which does a guaranteed crit, does a nice amount of damage, and it seals up Frieza for those first 2 turns. So that's going to be the most optimal way of approaching that final fight. If you can't have him on the starting rotation, it's not the end of the world, but his first appearance against that Frieza, he is going to be doing a ton of damage. So him supported by the rest of the team, especially with that LR Bardock like team, he's going to be very, very good. So next up we have Fascia. So Fascia is one of the Team Bardock free-to-play members that I definitely think you should bring. She has a built-in 50% chance to dodge. She also lowers attack on her super, so both of those things are incredibly useful for Super Battle Road, especially again in the final fight where there's only one enemy. Lowering his attack, especially in combined with sealing, means that he's just going to stop being able to do any sort of reasonable amount of damage to you, which is very, very good. She also creates rainbow orbs when there's an ally whose name includes Bardock. It doesn't mean the Team Bardock, but I would run her on rotation actually with the physical LR Bardock because he doesn't really want to be in slot 1. So you put her in slot 1, have the LR in slot 2, and then obviously every rotation where that in LR Team Bardock floats into the turn as the 3rd slot support, like they're both going to be looking very, very good. Now obviously she does kind of come down to RNG a little bit. You could not dodge any attacks including supers, and that's going to be bad, but you know, she can be pretty good for avoiding that damage and then lowering the enemy's attack. So that is the first rotation I would use, physical Lr Bardock and then Fascia. And then moving on to the next rotation, we have the actual free-to-play Bardock from the Team Bardock, Lr Bardock. He has a bit of a mini nuking passive. He gets 18% attack per key sphere obtained, but he reduces damage received by 10% per Team Bardock category ally on the team, up to 50%. So obviously, because we are running a full Team Bardock team, he's going to have 50% damage reduction. So he's going to be fairly good at tanking, especially on those turns again with the LR Team Bardock in slot 3 to provide 60% attack and defense. So he's going to be very, very good for tanking. He also seals on super attacks. This means we have a sealer on both rotations. So that's going to be very, very effective. The next up pick I would choose to run on rotation with that Lr Bardock is the AGL Borgos. He has a medium chance to stun on super attack. He also gets a guaranteed additional super attack when you're facing multiple enemies, so that's going to be helpful in the first 2 fights to try and make sure you're locking in that stun on the enemy that you target with him. And then he gets a little bit of extra attack and defense when facing only one enemy, which will be the last fight against Frieza. So you want to build this guy with additionals anyway, so he could potentially get that 2nd or 3rd super, depending on how many enemies there are, so you can increase that chance to stun. So on the 2nd rotation, you would have Lr Bardock in slot 1 to tank, seal up an enemy, and then have Borgos attack one of the enemies in an attempt to stun them. So if you get good RNG, especially in the last fight against Frieza, you can keep him sealed pretty much the entire time, with Fascia lowering his attack and then Borgos potentially stunning him as well. So with good RNG, this run would actually be really, really easy. So then next up, as the final pick, I've decided to go for the free-to-play AGL Great Ape Bardock, because he has an Easy A. He was one of the units that you needed to use for the Prime Battle Easy A Extreme Z area, and he's actually pretty solid after his Easy A. Raises attack and defense on super attack. He has a pretty reasonable amount of start of turn attack and defense as well as key, so it's very easy for him to super attack. He gets a bunch of extra attack when there's multiple enemies, and then he also gets an extra 3 key and extra attack when there is a Wicked Bloodline enemy. So again, the final fight against Frieza, he's going to be getting a nice little bit of extra attack. He doesn't have any utility like stunning or sealing or anything, but raising defense on super is obviously good. If you get an additional super attack, it's a double defense raise. He also has a chance to turn into a Great Ape. It is only 10%, but obviously if that goes off, that gives you a couple of turns of free damage where you can just wear down one of the enemies and you don't have to worry about taking any damage yourself. So those are the 6 units that I'm going to use for my team. I'm talking about the no item run, of course. I think this team is probably going to be able to get it done, especially now with how powerful physical Lr Bardock is. And so these are the 6 units that I would choose. But obviously if you don't have physical Lr Bardock, or maybe you haven't farmed up this guy, I've highlighted a couple of other ones that you can obviously fill in the gaps with. So we have the free-to-play physical Shugesh from the farmable Team Bardock units. He does raise defense on super. It's an infinite stack, but obviously Super Battle Road is not usually long enough to get a bunch of these stacks off. But obviously if you do get any additional supers, that's an additional defense raise. But then he does have quite a bit of utility based around what's been going on the turn or the previous turn with the other units that we've already talked about, because he gets a guaranteed crit if the enemy that he's attacking is stunned, and he guaranteed stuns the enemy if they're sealed. So again, in the final fight against Frieza, if you're able to keep him sealed quite a lot, then obviously this Shugesh comes in with a guaranteed stun as well. So even if the enemy is sealed, it means they can't super attack you. Certain units, like for example Fascia, if she doesn't dodge, are still going to be taking some damage from that Frieza until she's applied a few like attack lowers to him. So getting that guaranteed stun is obviously very good. And he has pretty decent base stats as well, 90% at the start of the turn whilst raising defense on super. So he is probably a solid pick. If you're missing any one of the first 6 units, he is probably the one that I would put in next. And then the other 2 units I wanted to talk about are the supports. They're not quite as good, especially defensively, but we've got the free-to-play farmable Tora. He raises attack and defense on super, so obviously multiple super attacks are good. He does buff all allies, key +2 attack and defense 30%. He recovers 10% HP whenever HP is 70% or less, and there are 5 or more low-class warriors allies on the team, which obviously there will be. So every time you drop below 70% HP and he comes onto the turn, he does give you a little bit of a heal, which is nice, but out of everybody that we've talked about, he's one of the weaker units defensively, so that's why you have to be very careful with using him. You definitely can, as long as you're careful with your item usage and your strategy, but in terms of like the most optimal team that I would try and use for like a no items run, I probably would not bring this guy on the team. And in a similar vein to him is the Great Ape Tora, because all of the Great Ape versions of Team Bardock are on the team, of course, but they're all super outdated at this point. Tora could be pretty useful out of all of them because he does lower attack on super and he buffs all allies 3 key and 30% attack. He also recovers up to 18% HP per giant form ally on the team. So if you've only got him, you're only getting 6%. If you're using that AGL Great Ape Bardock, and maybe the unit that you're missing is the physical LR, you could put this guy in as a support, and then you're getting 12% HP recovery at the start of the turn, which is pretty good, but his defense is just really, really bad, so you've got to be very careful about that. And of course, as the Great Ape character, he does have a 10% chance to transform as well, which could get you a couple of turns of free damage. But overall, in his untransformed state, I think defensively he's a bit more of a liability than the value you get out of his support passive. So those are the units I picked to talk about. The first 6 are the way I would build the team. I wouldn't recommend bringing any of the other like Great Apes. And then there's this Bardock who's a World Tournament card, but he's super old. He only supports AGL and STR units and his defense is really bad. So there's not a huge amount of option here. And then of course there was this free Bardock from the download celebration, but only JP got this unit, so he's not even an option to use for us on the Super Battle Road stage. So like I said at the start, this one was a little bit different to the others because there aren't really a huge amount of units that we could talk about, so I thought the best way to do this was just to literally go through the 6 units that I think are the best, that make the best team, and then to just recommend a couple of the other ones that I would prioritize if you are missing one of those 6. So let me know what you guys think down below. If you're able to make the exact team that I mentioned with the first 6 units, then I think that is your best bet. If you're not, let me know how you are going to change up the team based on what we've talked about in this video. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Master Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below for the Discord and the merch store, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.